rate buildups. So for your elemental estimate, this kind of goes hand in hand with your elemental estimate and a way to approach it. So and the example that was provided will give you the structure, but you always have to refer back to your elemental guide on what is included and what's not included in your elemental estimate and subsequently your rate buildup. So the main thing about the rate buildups is you're taking existing rates and amending them to be in the correct unit for your estimate. So there's numerous methods of preparing your estimate. Each specific method serves a particular purpose and requires a different kind of information. So sometimes you will have the information available, sometimes you have to build up your own rates, etc., etc. But most methods involve the use of rates provided by contractors and their tenders for their similar projects. So you take your BOQ rates and you transform or translate that into the correct unit. So, however, sometimes the bill rates for items in a new estimate are not available, and the QS is obliged to build up his own rates. So, the main thing is here's the example of what it will look like. So, you go to your elemental guide and you look at the specific item that you want to conduct a rate buildup. So, you have, for instance, your external facade, and in your elemental guideline, it stipulates that you have different components that you have to have, and then you've got your description of the specific component. So for brick and block walls, you will have, if it's a 230 brick wall, you will have one here. If you've got a 110 millimeter wall, you will have that underneath still 103.10. And then you will go on like that. So you just, in your description, you differentiate between different units and the rate buildups that will be conducted underneath them. Okay, so and then you will see you've got brickwork is measured underneath as a per square meter rate, but you might have the instance where you have to include your reinforcing or brick force, which is usually measured in meters and with the size provided for it. So you need to calculate how many layers of brickwork there is, and then it is translated into your rate and subsequently your cost. Okay, something also just to note here is your quantity to get to your element or component. So the calculation that we've got here is the element that you use for your brickwork. So you want to get to a point where if you only do your estimate up to the evaluations section, you will use these rates that you've built up to do that type of estimation. So it's related to your component way of measuring. Okay, so just take note of this. So the construction area of the entire building is this, but your element area, so your brickwork, is only this 5,860. So just be mindful of that, especially for your assignments as well. So let's look at examples. So your employer asks you to price an element estimate measured on component level. Your company has a few current rates that you can apply to some of the components, but you will need to build up a rate for the following components: reinforced strip footings for 1 brick walls, your solid floors at ground level, and then you will. And the question asks what items will be included in the rate buildups in each of the following components. So that's where you refer back to your elemental guide. So if you look at your elemental guide, the components for unreinforced strip footings include your excavations, extra over for hard rock, soft rock, carting away, your risk of collapse, backfilling, soil insecticide, and reinforced concrete. Most of these items you will be familiar with throughout your measurement tenure. So, and then you've got your component. Solid floors, for instance, will include your filling underneath your floors, compaction underneath your floors, your DPC, soil insecticide, unreinforced concrete, etc. So let's look at a practical example. So you will see in your elemental estimate, you will have your component reinforced strip footing. You measured it in meters, and you measured 35.10 meters, and you had a rate of 1,285 Rand and 40 cents to build up this rate. Okay, but it's not that simple, because if you use your rates that you build up, you have a lot of items. So you've got your excavations, you've got your concrete, you've got your blinding, you've got your rip and compact, you've got your brickwork, you've got your backfill, etc., etc., which is not given in a meter unit usually when you are measuring or when you retrieve the information. So the main thing is to be able to retrieve that information so that you can then use that or convert that into the relevant unit. Okay, so this is just the measurements. This is just the front end or the end of your estimate or measurement, basically. But to get your rate, we have to look at the following. So list all the items that form part of the element or component. Measure each item according to the unit of measurement, and then calculate the answer for the total. Okay, so the main thing is you just taking the items that you need to include in your estimate and you're converting it to a per meter rate. So here you will see the 1,285 Rand as the rate that you used in the previous slide. So calculate the answer in total, okay, and then multiply the measurement with the rate to get the total cost. Okay, so the main thing is what you need to look at. You've got your timesing. We'll get into that just now. And then we've got our different dimensions. So for excavations, you measure it in cubes. So you will populate all three of your dimensions. If we look at compaction of your base, so that is a square meter rate usually that you will have. So you will have two dimensions that you usually use. Your hard rock, soft rock is usually a percentage, so it's just your timesing, and then you use your excavation dimensions to calculate that. You should be familiar with that. And then you've got, I'm just looking for an item that is only one dimension. Soil poisoning is also square meter. Imported filling is also cubes. Reinforcement is a rate per cube, so it is a kilogram, or timesing times your cubes for your concrete. You will see your concrete and your reinforcement usually goes hand in hand. And yeah, so I don't see an item, there's no items where it's only one item that's measured here, like a door or so, but then you will just have a 1 1 1 1 with a rate here for the installation of a let's say semi-solid door. Okay, so let's look at what we then do. So at your excavation remove, we're only looking at one unit, one side of the excavation. It's 800 millimeters wide, the excavations, and 1 meter deep, and then we get to a 0.8 answer times your rate per cube to get a rate per meter. So this dimension here, the 1, is we're converting it to a 1 meter section. So for 800 millimeter wide and 1 meter deep excavation for 1 meter in length, we times that together to get to our factor that is applied to our rate to get to the rate per meter. The same with your extra over for soft rock is a 10% allowance and 5% for hard rock. your compaction of your base is a per square meter rate. So we've got the width, and then we've got 1 and 1, and that's used for that. It's a very similar calculation. Let's just get to our cubes. We've got our reinforced concrete, which is only one component that we're using, but it's 0.8 millimeters wide and 35 or 350 millimeters high, times only for 1 meter to get to a 0.28 times the rate per cube. Okay. Similar to our reinforcement, we've got 80 Rand that is then applied to per cube. So it's a 0.8 times 0.35 again to get to our factor that's then times with our rate. Imported backfilling, here you can see we've got two sides on both sides of the brickwork that's measured. So it's a 0.2 or 2 times 0.24, which is this on the sides the measurements, and then the height that's left over that needs to be filled, and so forth. Just note that the soil poisoning, the calculation wasn't included here, but it's basically just the area of the soil poisoning, and it's supposed to show to the bottom and the side. So it's just something that was omitted here. So just make sure that you know how to calculate that. Very simple. Then you just add all of that up to get to your specific rate. So a class activity that we did, you can do this at home as well, is to compile a detailed price build-up for the measurement for the following components, measured in an elemental cost estimate by referring to the drawings, assumptions, and the rates. So you've got the following dimensions and the following information, and so forth. So the main thing is to look at what is on. So if you've got so the question was for solid floors, you have to refer back to your elemental guide on what is included in your solid floors. So we've got the compaction underneath the floors, we've got our G5 material important, our DPC, soil insecticide to the floor, our 30 MPa mesh reinforcement, and then we've got our mesh reinforcement. Here you can see I've added the units that it is usually measured in, but we're converting it into a per square meter rate. Okay, so very straightforward. The main thing here is to get the relevant rates that you need to apply. So the G5 is only one layer, so it's 0.5, 0.5, and it's 0.15 millimeters high. And then our reinforcement is 100 millimeters, or our concrete is 100 millimeters thick, so it's for a square meter. So everything is just 1 times 0.1 gives us a factor of 0.1 times our concrete rate in this case. Then again, you just add it up to get to your relevant rate that is then applied or can be used in your project. Okay, so that was more or less what we covered last week. We just went through it a little bit more in detail. There was 1 or 2 questions on what the blinding is, how the scarifying usually works, etc., etc. But I think the main thing is just to go through the examples and see how, if you understand how the rates are built up. So yeah, thank you very much. That is basically the lecture for just the rate build-ups. The same principle is then applied. The only main thing about rate build-ups is to practice and apply that information. Okay, thank you very much.